about, as a teaching pastor, he feels a little bit like his friend Victor, who's always trying to strongly convince people of these invisible realities. You can't see the germs in the water, but it's killing you. It's making you sick. You can't see these spiritual truths that we're talking about and that we're going to shed a light on, but they're killing you. They're making you spiritually sick. You're stagnating in your spiritual growth because of them. How do you get people to see that? Well, that's going to be kind of the basis of our study, is what are these deep-seated water wells that you've maybe have been drinking from since you were a kid, but it's killing you. Idleman writes, "My prayer is that in Jesus you will find your thirst met by a wellspring that will never run dry, a spring of eternal life that brings healing instead of sickness, life instead of death." And it's beautiful words, and it's probably beautiful because he kind of stole them. Look at John 4:13 through 14. Jesus, he's speaking to this Samaritan woman at a well, and he states, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." So a lot like the words that we saw of Idleman. Another advantage of getting older is not just having authors that you can relate with and it feels good. It's kind of coming to this realization that nothing quenches my thirst like Christ. You get the next level job, you get more money, you get the house almost paid off, like whatever it is, and it's just like, oh, I thought it would be more fulfilling, but it's kind of not. And so, are you tired of drinking from the same old polluted water wells that humanity has drunk from and has searched for happiness in their entire lives, and it still just doesn't fill that God-shaped hole? And the thing about it is, we all kind of come from like these different backgrounds. So your water well that's dirty might look different than mine. I actually didn't grow up with a lot of money or parents who were status or money hungry, if you will. So it's never really been that thing for me. Like a lot of men will find, identity in their status and whatnot. But I didn't really have that to look at growing up. And so it's not as much of a pull for me to drink from that well as it might be some. But for us, we loved having the TV on and we loved a good meal. And so it may be more of like that temple of pleasure that we like to kind of hang out at, if I'm being honest. So your family's well may look different than mine. Your polluted water sources may look different than mine. And guess what? We just need to help each other. We need to understand each other and support each other from our family history. But regardless of whatever well you've been drinking from your entire life, the end result is the same. You end up feeling sick. You end up feeling thirsty again because nothing quenches like Christ. Well, when you think about idolatry, honestly, it seems a little old school. It seems a little random. Like, why not a study on bearing false witness? Like, that's one of the 10 Commandments too. But Idleman, he makes this case that idolatry is one of the top issues in the Bible. It's kind of like an overarching sin that you can bucket the other sins into. And he talks about how there's about 1,000 or so references to idolatry in the Bible. It's the top of the commandment list. Idleman states the words on this slide: "There are gods at war, little g. These gods clash for the throne of your heart, and much is at stake." And you think back to ancient Israel, idolatry is super visible. You've got golden calves, you got Asherah poles, Baal altars, and then so you think it's not really relevant. And it's hard to see because today's idolatry is a little bit more internal. It's a little bit more cultural, power, entertainment, money, self. But the Old Testament, it looks at idolatry through this lens of spiritual adultery. And you hear that word and you kind of cringe and you think, ooh, that's a bad thing. And you look at Hosea, and you look at Ezekiel 16, and you see the serious nature of idolatry. But today we have a hard time seeing it for what it is, because for us, maybe it's just a hobby. And so it's hard to call something you love, something that's your identity, that you're known as the fill-in-the-blank guy, as being an idol. And Idleman, he states, the deadliest war is the one most of us never realize is being fought. What if the gods take identities that are so ordinary that we don't recognize them as gods at all? And it's not on the slide, but he goes on to say, like what if we do our kneeling and our bowing, not physically, but we do it with our imaginations, we do it with our checkbooks, we do it with our search engines, our calendars. Like, what is it that you are obsessing over? Our gods don't have names like Baal or Molech. They are things like success, comfort, family, sports, phones, the list goes on and on. One theologian once stated, the human heart is a perpetual idol factory, which is a nice mental image. And then James Harding of Harding University, he said something fairly profound. The idols of affection, the things that we love, are more dangerous than the idols of stone. They demand our devotion while masquerading as love. I can't imagine people in the Old Testament really like cherishing the wooden or the stone idols and just really like obsessing over them as far as like really just enjoying them. But Harding's basically saying, idolatry has such a hold on us because it's these things that we like truly, truly love, and it tricks us. And Idleman says, what if I told you that every sin you're struggling with, every discouragement you're dealing with, even the lack of purpose you're living with are because of idolatry? And so this kind of makes you want to scratch your head and think, I see people out there, they're like these like on fire, like almost like annoyingly Christian people who I'm like, how are you so enthusiastic? How are you so all in? And you kind of wonder, like, I don't really have that purpose in my life. I'm just, check the box and I'll show up. How do you get into that whole, like, on fire for kingdom living? It just feels like something that's kind of unachievable at times, for me at least. Well, just maybe there is an idol that's blocking your heart and that you need to dethrone. Colossians 3:5 says, put to death covetousness, which is idolatry. And I think a lot of times in America we have this giant problem because we live also in a very wealthy part of a wealthy country. We live amongst a large consumer culture. We're always comparing on social media, seeing what everyone else has. And so it's this idol that has really stunted our spiritual growth, and it gets hard to get excited about spiritual matters of the heart, for kingdom living, because we're just so focused on things instead of God. Idleman states, goals can become gods. You start to serve them, live for them, and sacrifice for them. That's the big point that we're going to touch on for a minute. So ask yourself, what is it that I will gladly sacrifice my afternoon, or I will gladly give up this money for fill in the blank? And that can sometimes lead you to what the nature of your idol is. Where does your time and your money go? And in his book, he gives these examples, a couple examples. One is of this really highly successful businessman. You see the people bowing down to the money there. And this businessman had a ton of money. And he ended up getting busted by the IRS. And so Kyle goes and talks to the gentleman and is like, why did you do this other than for financial gain? And the man said, I didn't even need the money. I don't know why I did it. And he came to this conclusion that in the beginning, the money was going to serve him. It helps support the family, and you can give and save and these good things, right? But what happens, they said, is somewhere along the way, you will switch roles. So money serving you, harmless, right? It's doing some good things for me. Money's not bad. But then somewhere along the way, it switches roles, and it's slow. And then you end up serving the money. He didn't need the money, but he just had to get more. And then it talks about another case study, this young woman. We talk about, the God of romance. And we think about everything that has been sacrificed to the God of romance. You think about, people who were promiscuous before marriage, and you think, it's no big deal, my spouse will forgive me. But you think about how that's robbing you from a lifetime of deep, true intimacy. And we sacrifice so much so early to these gods, and it robs us of this more full, robust life that we could have. And it just shows you how truly costly bowing down and sacrificing to these idols can be. You might have somebody, for example, bowing down to money, and there's those days I'll come in from work and my eyes are bloodshot, and I can tell I gave too much of myself today. I have no mental energy. I'm too tired to play. I'm too tired to have a spiritual conversation with the kids. And you can just tell I went a little far today. I went a little too hard in the paint. And you can also look in other people's eyes usually and see that guy gave everything today and has nothing in the tank. And so it's just one of those things where we just have to always keep ourselves in check. And Idleman states, idolatry isn't just one of many sins, rather it's the one great sin that all others come from. Idolatry isn't an issue, it's the issue. Again, his opinion, but he does make a very strong case that we will see for some of the things he says. First commandment, this no other gods before me. This is something that I hadn't really thought about as far as the phrasing of no other gods before me. But Moses, he's standing on Mount Sinai, and he receives the 10 Commandments from God. And the first one was, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Exodus 20:2-3. And when you hear him say, no other gods before me, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I've got this pocket list full of these things that I really enjoy, but I'll make sure God's at the top, and then it'll be idol 1, 2, 3, these things that I just can't let go of. And Idleman states, he says, God declines to sit atop an organizational flowchart. He is the organization. There are no partial gods, no honorary gods, no interim gods, no assistant to the regional gods, which is a little shout out to the fans of The Office. But he talks about this term, in my presence. In my presence doesn't just mean it's like this checklist. It's like he's at top, and then in my presence is basically saying, it's the before me. Before me is not the in order. It's not a ranking. Before me can actually be translated in my presence. So it's like there are these other gods out there. I want you to obliterate them. I don't want a ranking system. I don't want any gods. In my presence would be a better translation. And then this I thought too was interesting. After that comes the second commandment, which is, you shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above or that is in the earth beneath. And he says that anything can be hammered into an idol, and we know that. We see, he talks about DIY idolatry and how you kind of mix and match your own choosing of what you love. Psalm 106:19 states, they made a calf in Horeb and worshipped a metal image. They exchanged the glory of God for the image of an ox that eats grass. They forgot God, their Savior. So not a great trade when you take the founder, when you take the creator, and then you replace it with the created. And Idleman states we have to ask, are we really any different when we replace God with statues or idols of our own creation? And the thing about, when we create idols, it may not be overly apparent, because I think we kind of like to play this mix and match game where I'm kind of into the little bit of this and I really like a little bit of that, and so we might mold this idol with these different parts, and so no one can really point and be like, aha, I gotcha, this is what's keeping you spiritually stunted. Because it's more like I've got these 10 things that are keeping me so distracted. I can't really get on fire for the Lord because I'm kind of just pulled in 10 different directions. And if you think about that, this analogy helps me kind of realize that. And I know that it's a little bit of a stretch from the second commandment, but if you're truly trying to just reflect on it and be a Mary and sit at the feet of Jesus and just contemplate what do these things mean, then I like to play this game and really think, what could this mean? What does making an idol in modern America look like? And so it can kind of sneak in because it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And before you know it, you've just kind of spiritually drifted. So if you really self-reflect, maybe you can see the idol that you have crafted in your own life. And Idleman, he goes on to provide examples, and some of these stepped on my toes, and they might step on yours, but he talks about, perhaps it's this mixture of a house that we constantly upgrade. I'm always thinking of what's the next project, things like that. A promotion that comes with a corner office, got these kids, I need more money. A team that wins the championship. I'm not super into sports, but, people are, and I'm into like movies and shows more, and equally unproductive. A body that is toned and fit, yeah, did you say that's you? Yeah, there's this list of things, and some of them it's like, get off my toes. And some of it, I'm like, I'll help someone else with that one, right? But we work hard at molding and creating our own golden calves. David Lipscomb, he once wrote, man will worship. He is made for it. And if he forsakes the true God, he will just make another. Kind of haunting words, but very true. Almost done. I like this quote. We mold golden calves in gyms, in corner offices, and in stadiums. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it that's your purpose? What is your driving force of your life? What are you pursuing? What are you creating? And then this is the final slide, and then we'll be dismissed. But Idleman, he concludes with the first chapter, and he says, I want you to think about idolatry as being like this tree. And I created this with ChatGPT because this did not exist on the internet. But he said, imagine you have this tree, and idolatry is the tree, and from it dangles all of these things that we struggle with. Maybe one branch has a pot of gold, symbolic of course, chasing money, pursuing wealth, that sort of thing. Another branch, it grows all kinds of food. For those who might seek comfort in food instead of God. Another branch has a mirror hanging from it, and it shows this version, this idealized reflection of yourself, right? Like if I worked out and ate just right and was just so spiritual and read every book, I'd be this awesome person, right? Anybody like to struggle with that one too? No, just me. That's cool. Okay, another branch is showing these figures that are like intimately intertwined. Of course, this is, for the person who might struggle with finding romantic love, and like that is their ultimate desire. They've seen way too many Hallmark movies, and all they care about is romance because, that's just all that matters in life. One branch might have a set of keys. I got my I don't even know what these would be to, a beach house in Florida maybe, which I'm okay if you have that, and especially if you want to open it up to members of the church. Or maybe it's to your river house in Hawkeye, or whatever it is, a luxury car, Toyota Corolla, you name it. And the point is to help us see idolatry is like this tree from which all of these sins and these nasty little struggles grow. And idolatry has always been not just an issue, but it's been the issue. It's this trunk of this nasty tree, and a lot of our other problems are just merely the branches. Barton Stone of the Restoration Movement, he said, "The first great command, love the Lord your God, demands not just affection, but allegiance. There's no place in a believer's life for divided devotion." In other words, we can't be out there just creating all these idols that split our heart into 100 pieces. Alexander Campbell wrote, "Let us tear down the altars that we have built to self, to money, to prestige, and instead enthrone Christ anew." So my hope is that as we go throughout this study, the people of God, we will begin to have our eyes opened, and we will begin to see modern day idolatry for what it truly is. And we will take up the axe, and we will begin to chop down this ugly tree in our lives and be able to be set free and then be on fire and be those people who are just all in on kingdom living. Thank you for being here tonight. If you do end up getting the book, next week we will be in chapter 2. Todd Johnson will take us on a journey of how the heart is the battleground of the gods of modern day idolatry. So thank you all for being here tonight. You're dismissed.